Welcome to another episode of the Hearse Chaser podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk all about emotions. I feel exceptionally prepared, having three daughters and being married for 15 years. We're going to talk about emotions. It's not the thing you would expect from an estate planning attorney, but we're going to dive into those emotions, talk about them, name them, and more importantly, talk about how you can have estate planning without fear.
You're listening to the Hearse Chaser podcast show. Here's your host, Stephen McClellan.
All right, welcome back. And talking about emotions is not an easy thing to do. However, I've gotten so much better in my life identifying that emotions are kind of subtitles that people have while they're talking. I know they're saying words, but I've learned that often underneath them there's some kind of emotion. There's some kind of fear, there's worry, there's overwhelm. And understanding that that's just how people communicate really helps have a deeper conversation. Now, I have not always been the best at communicating with folks and understanding that, but when you have daughters, when you have a wife, you learn, and it makes me more of a complete attorney. Uh, uh, I think earlier in my career, the idea of someone crying in my office was absolutely terrifying. And now it's something that I myself get teared up when clients talk to me about the things that concern them and what they want for the future or regrets. And in some ways, estate planning is kind of the culmination of a number of things. And I've heard so many folks say things like, I wish I would have saved more or left more for my kids. There's a conversation, an honest conversation about why I can't pick this kid to be in charge. And that is a very charged emotional conversation. The first one I want to focus on is the one of fear, because I think fear is the number one concern that people have. It's the elephant in the room. I can tell you that people spend more time researching new vacuum cleaners than they do planning for their legacy. And the way vacuums are made these days, it's not uncommon to have to buy two or three of them in your lifetime. And I can say this, I understand vacuums because my father was a vacuum guy. He sold them and he fixed them up. So I'm very aware of how much people really care about their vacuums and the type of vacuums and the repairs and all that good stuff. But estate planning is often pushed to the side, and statistics show that where half of Americans don't have an estate plan, and it's not for a lack of money. It's just I don't want to plan for my death, and so the focus I think needs to be organizing for life, and that's kind of the idea that they've tried to talk to us as estate planning and elder law attorneys is, hey, don't talk about planning for death, talk about organizing for life. That sounds better. That makes people feel less anxious about the topic. And honestly, if I wasn't in this area, I have a trademark for Hearse Chaser, right? It's not something that is that I'm it's unique to me. So I want you to know that it is kind of a first time for a lot of people to think about it. You certainly, I think it's best to think about it not in the context of when there are emergencies. And that can be very scary when you're concerned about your own health, trying to do estate planning at the same time. So I cannot stress this enough. You will be in a better clarity of mind and thought to come in early. And that's why I'm a big proponent of doing estate planning early. When I say early, I say 50s and 60s. Waiting to late 60s, waiting to 70s is really, really a late time. But the second problem beyond fear is just the procrastination. Because this I hear all the time. If I don't plan for the end won't come. Okay, if I don't plan for it, I don't have to worry about it because it's not going to come. There's no correlation that if you do an estate plan, you are more likely to pass away. It just doesn't, that's not how it works. But a lot of people have that mindset, and I've heard, I mean, there's almost this it's ritualistic. It's kind of scary how people like, oh no, if I do this, that's like saying that's the end of my life. That's not how that works at all. You're not prolonging anything. A lot of people, most people, when they survey folks and they say, okay, you haven't done a estate plan, we want to know why. The reason they give is just they haven't gotten around to it. And so the delay, I think, in some ways, I think there are some who think, oh, this will prolong my life, or I just don't want to get around to it. Um, it's not saying that it's not saying there's laziness. It's just this defense mechanism that we have against mortality. And it's I can't remember who it was. I think it was Marcus Aurelius when I was reading his book on meditations. If you ever get a chance to read it, he's like the only emperor that was a philosopher, and he essentially says things like, "Look, we're all going to die, and you got to make the most of it." And I think he says something like, "Say that you died today. Just say that you died today, and then make the rest of your life worth something." I thought that was a kind of an interesting philosophy to think, what if it were all over today, and looking at the rest of your life as a bonus? And I think some people who have had a health scare or a near-death experience, a lot of them have that feeling of, wow, I've got some bonus time here. And when there is a health scare, a lot of times people don't have the time to do the estate plan. And we get called to the hospital a lot of times in those periods of time. But oftentimes when they come into our office after a health scare, they are so ready. I mean, that emotion is very high on wanting to get things taken care of. It's better to frame it in the context not of your own emotions, but what are we showing to our kids? And that's really an ultimate act of love that you're giving your family, even in the darkest hour, or you're making hard choices, or you're grieving, that you're really trying to set them up for success and sharing them. Okay. So beyond the procrastination, the fear, I think the third biggest emotion is the like, I don't want to give up control. I don't trust people. And if I sign these papers, I'm giving up control. And, the conversation I've had some really tough conversations with folks. And a very common one in the elder law world is where you have a situation where like mom and dad is not doing well. They have good days and bad days, but they don't want to sign paperwork because they don't want to turn things over. And I have to tell them, I say, look, if you don't sign these papers, your kids are easily going to go and get a guardianship over you, and the state is going to have control over you. Okay. And a lot of people say, at least you can choose this, at least you can change your mind about it. But when it gets sent to the judge and the judge signs off on it, you're not easily going to change a judge's mind from one person to another. So my argument is like without a plan, you're surrendering control to the state, which is even more chaotic and less controlling. So maybe some of that is the fear that your kids are going to mismanage things or not manage things as well as you. And that's a fair thing to say because a lot of times, you may not have a kid that you fully trust. And you might be concerned that, hey, this person might mismanage my funds, and that in effect would hurt my other kids who are not in control. So maybe naming a third party or a bank or something to manage it might be a better option. So that fear is taken care of. So when I guess when you're thinking about that, there's also this emotion of, oh, I get this a lot. This probably is the biggest the moment that people probably get the most emotional in my office when I say, well, how do you want things divided up? I think most people want to say divide it evenly. But when they say, or they pause, or they can't even speak, and you can just kind of see the kind of that thing in their throat that's preventing them to talk, it's they know that it's not the best thing to do. Maybe it's a situation where I don't want to give the money to my kid because my kid is in a bad marriage, and that spouse is just going to manipulate them, is going to take the money, going to do what they want. And so it's maybe not necessarily the kid, but it's the kid's marriage. And that has been this long concern for mom and dad for years and years and years. And they've been able to kind of help that child, maybe with a backbone, maybe help them out as they've been controlled and manipulated through a spouse. And they're concerned that when they're gone, the safety net is gone. And maybe there's a concern where I just can't give money to my kid because they're bad with money. They're just going to take all the money, spend it on themselves, and it's going to be gone in like 10 days or something. And as soon as they get it, it'll burn a hole right in their pocket, and that's hard because you spend an enormous amount of your life saving, and to see all of it gone that quickly, that's a very hard thing to do. I think that emotion is a big concern.
Thank you for tuning in to the Hearse Chaser podcast show. Our mission is to be your first choice for last wishes. Want to dive deeper? Join us over at the Hearse Chaser Academy, where we've created 8 on-demand courses for each stage of life. From young adulthood to retirement, navigating separation or blended families, and everything in between, we help you plan for the future, no matter where you're at. Now stay with us as the ride continues on the Hearse Chaser podcast show.
This is probably the worst, is when they say, my child just doesn't talk to me, and I don't have a good relationship with them, and I don't think I can leave them the money. Oh my goodness. Uh, those are the hardest moments in those meetings. A lot of times I'll just kind of pause and just kind of listen. And lawyers are really good at fixing problems. That's kind of what people come to us to fix a problem. And we say, oh, you can do this, this, and this, and this. Attorneys are not the best at holding space, which I think that means being a place where people can communicate what's going on, don't be judgmental, understand, be curious about it, respectful, and a lot of that's a lot of attorneys aren't good at that. It's something they never develop in their skill set of being an advocate and a counselor. But I think in those moments, I lean so much more on counseling, and instead of being saying, "Oh, we're getting off topic here," or trying to change the topic, uh, asking questions I have found to say, well, tell me more about that. What do you mean by this? Or could you help me understand? It is a way that I've learned to lean into it and not run away from it. Because a lot of times, I'll be honest, I think men are mostly want to run away from those kind of conversations. And I have found that I think those few moments really help clients understand, well, this is a safe person I can talk to. And it's always nice for me to say, I know you feel this way today, but you may change your mind in 5 or 10 years. So why don't we just draft this in a way that reflects how you feel today, but leave it open for a possible change in the future? And in that way, I think I'm honoring to how they feel presently, but the realization that people can change for the better or for the worse in a number of cases. So let's make sure the estate plan gives you some flexibility. And I think that's a very healing thing, because the emotion, I think, is maybe what I'm going to say in my final documents is going to be like a conflict grenade. And I'm going to throw this conflict grenade, and so is not going to like this, so and so is not going to like that. And I have to say, well, okay, well, it looks like you have some fear how this child is going to respond to this. And when making a decision like your estate plan, we can't, I think sometimes we try to make a decision that, well, I can't not name them first or they're going to be upset. That's when people are very controlled. And there's, that's not the way it should be. It should be mom and dad making the best decision. And a lot of times, I'm a third party, and I hear that and I say, well, if your child is that kind of person who's going to be upset, they probably don't need to be in that role anyway. Okay, they're telling on themselves the way they react to things, and maybe we should name uh, somebody else to be in charge. And I like to acknowledge how my client is feeling, almost controlled by their kid's reaction. And as a parent, one of the most important things is when my kids are upset with me and they're yelling at me and they're telling me I'm a terrible dad, which I've heard numerous times. I know that in that moment they're just saying how they feel. It's not a reflection on me. And I'm still their parent. They're going to come around and say, they shouldn't have said those things. So it is a very big concern about how kids will react. I often say, well, I want to know what you want. You're the one in charge, and I want to say that uh, a lot of times I may be talking to a widow who has often, maybe generationally speaking, I think the 70 and 80-year olds, there's been more of the divided roles where husband did this and wife did this. And a lot of times, husband made decisions and wife went along with that. I think the younger generations, I see it more 50-50. And I think it's important to say to that surviving spouse, if their spouse who predeceased them controlled them and made a lot of decisions for them, they kind of went along with it. That no, this is your moment, and you get to make these decisions. It's not their decision. You get to be the one to make the best decision because you are ultimately responsible for how this plays out. And so giving clients that encouragement, the confidence in them is your decision. And you don't have to pick the oldest first. I don't know where that goes in the realm of emotion, but a lot of people feel like, well, that's the oldest and I should pick them first. And that's really not the best emotion it should be, this is me relying more on my attorney and counseling. I think it should be the best person, the most organized person, the one that is the most agreeable, the one to all the other kids, the one who is most fair, maybe the one who has the most money, so it's not really going to change them one way or another. And a lot of times, if you have four kids and you put the one that has the most money in charge, maybe they don't come away with 25%. Maybe they come away with 20 or 19%, which is less, but it's signaling to the rest of the family, look, I'm taking less, so you can't really be upset with me about taking more. And I think that's you can say that. You can tell your kids, that child, look, I'm picking you. I know that you're in a better financial place and you don't really need this. And so that if it comes to it, take less. And a lot of families, I think, do that when they have a bank account and they just put one kid on it, right? And they know that kid's going to get it all, and they trust that kid to divide everything. So, um, ultimately, I think most of our clients, when they come into our office, they have a lot of concerns. There's a lot of emotion into it. And when they leave and everything is done, they have this peace of mind that when you focus on how this is so much better than where you currently are, you feel a lot better about that, planning for what could happen in your future. So, um, if I could give a simple piece of advice, is to just take inventory of yourself and how you feel about estate planning. And I think if you start in a meeting with an attorney, say, this is where I'm at. This is how I feel. I think that's a completely fair way to start a meeting with an attorney. You don't have to jump into who gets what. I think a lot of attorneys like to do that. They like to jump right into it and say who gets what, who's in charge. And a lot of times I'm like, well, tell me how you're feeling about this. Is this something that you have been thinking about for a number of years or has just jumped on your radar? So, I just don't want this to be a legal chore that everybody dreads, like going to the DMV. It is a final chapter of your autobiography, and it should be one that you write and you write very, very well. You can fill in all the other stuff, but you got to get this last chapter right so that there's a smooth transition from one generation to the next. And it is also okay in putting together your estate plan that you put your emotions in your estate plan, in your distribution. It's okay to write words like, it causes me great sadness. It gives me great hope, what you will do with this money. I am so happy to be able to leave you something behind. I don't see that a lot in estate planning today. It's very dry and very cut and dry. But you can put that emotion in there. And I think the old estate plans in the past had more emotion and more feeling into the writing. And it's certainly okay to request that, to put some language in there. I don't think in any way it messes up your intent or it makes it ambiguous. I think you can draft it in a way that makes it even more clear and concise when you actually put feeling into what you're drafting. Because if it ever was contested, not only does the judge see that this particular child only gets a smaller share, but it caused a great sadness that they had to do that. I mean, that reads a little different than saying, oh, this one doesn't get a fourth, they get a tenth. Reads different. So I think putting those words in there, I think can help your estate plan. And so emotions are something to name, to understand, but also they can be very helpful in how you do your estate plan. So thanks for riding along on a very emotional estate plan drive, and we hope you have a better ride with the Hearse Chaser podcast.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Hearse Chaser podcast show. Please remember, you can't outrun a hearse, but you can leave your family with a smooth ride.